Good evening, Bahamas. Coming up tonight.
A shortage of nurses having a drastic impact on the country's public hospital.
A group of Cabbage Beach vendors slammed the Prime Minister.
Cabinet expected to spend a day discussing marijuana. That story straight ahead.
Our news is brought to you by Alive, the nation's newest and best LTE network.
Good to be alive.
Welcome to our news and thanks for joining us. I'm Kyle Joaquin. Topping news tonight, Cabinet is expected to spend a day discussing the decriminalization of marijuana. That's according to Press Secretary Anthony Newbould, who says the Prime Minister wants the voices of the people to be heard. His comments come days after several cabinet ministers said marijuana is not high on the administration's agenda. Jared Hayes tells us more.
Following a highly publicized CARICOM meeting on the decriminalization of marijuana, Press Secretary Anthony Newbould says Cabinet will meet and spend a day discussing the hot-button issue. Newbould says even after that meeting, the Prime Minister will reserve a decision.
The Prime Minister, he's committed to taking a day for his Cabinet to talk about several issues. The whole issue with marijuana is one of them. In Cabinet, they will spend a day discussing that and have that discussion before any other movement is made with respect to that. Prime Minister says always, and he continues to emphasize this, the Bahamian, whatever happens, the Bahamian people must have a say.
CARICOM has set a July deadline for its recommendation on what, if any, change in the law should take place. Asked whether government will commit itself to that recommendation, Newbould says it's too soon to say.
Got to have that discussion first. Got to have that discussion. And again, you know, we obviously we can speculate, but again, you don't want to get into a situation where you're almost determining beforehand what the final result is going to be. No, we don't know what's going to happen.
Newbould says the Prime Minister hasn't expressed any particular view on the matter, including whether he supports medical marijuana. He also couldn't say if ministers had a chance to watch any of the online coverage of that CARICOM meeting, adding that he expects his Cabinet colleagues who are in attendance to bring him up to speed.
He didn't indicate that he did, and he's actually, a lot of his physical activities are still constrained. But no, he didn't indicate that he watched that. But, you know, again, I'm sure two of his ministers were there. And so whatever that information was that was revealed, communicated, shared at that meeting, I'm sure he will be able to access that information.
Newbould says it's unlikely that those views will come from a referendum, but instead they may proceed with more town hall style meetings.
No indication for a referendum. I would imagine you probably will have more meetings. And you know, one of the obligations really all members of Parliament has been directed by the Prime Minister. You got to have town meetings every month. And so I imagine in the course of those town meetings, and obviously people are prepared to speak nowadays, they will hear a lot about how people feel about what is happening in the country.
Reporting for our news, I'm Jared Higgs.
The intensive care unit of Princess Margaret Hospital has been forced to turn patients away due to what Health Minister Dr. Dwayne Sands described as an absolutely critical situation at the public health care facility. Sands says some areas have been shut down because PMH simply doesn't have the staff. He says controversial decisions have to be made to address this problem, which could mean the difference between life and death. Georgia Bain reports.
Now, as Princess Margaret Hospital suffers from the closure of several wards and lack of funding, the Minister of Health, Dr. Dwayne Sands, tells us that they're also feeling the pinch of losing experienced nurses on a daily basis. The intensive care unit is suffering, according to the minister, who said that the lack of manpower is having a drastic ripple effect, resulting in sections of that critical ward being shut down.
As of this week, 4 intensive care unit beds are shut down at Princess Margaret Hospital because we simply don't have the staff.
So is that critical of a point?
It is absolutely critical. And so the implications are that there are Bahamian patients who would wish to be in the intensive care unit, but they cannot be in the intensive care unit because we simply do not have the manpower, the nursing support to care for them safely in the ICU.
According to Sands, the rate of loss of nurses may result in a controversial decision to look at nurses separate and apart from other health professionals. The government is currently spending thousands of dollars outsourcing nurses, but the health minister says they would prefer Bahamians.
There is a huge contingent of non-Bahamian nurses, many from the Philippines and other countries, and we continue to recruit. Our preference would be to staff our critical care areas with Bahamian personnel, Bahamian experts. But as rapidly as we train nurses, we lose nurses either to North America, to retirement, or to the private sector. And what it means, I believe, is that we have to look at nurses separate and apart from many of the other professions. Now, I know that that will be very controversial, but the implications have life and death implications for our people.
Sands says the government has to find a way to demonstrate more appreciation for nurses in the public sector, and that may mean having a conversation with the nurses union.
The conversation has started, and what we are looking to do is to see how we can modify the terms of engagement of nurses, how we can demonstrate more appreciation for what they do. Clearly, that has service implications. It may mean that we look at the way we deploy nurses. They currently deployed in what we call a 4-on, 4-off rotation. That has implications for time and reimbursement.
Reporting for our News, I'm Georgie O'Bain.
Several Cabbage Beach vendors who were charged in connection with a 2016 protest that resulted in the destruction of a fence leading to Cabbage Beach are today slamming Prime Minister Dr. Hubert Minnis. Those vendors claim they were misled by Dr. Minnis, whom they accused of using them for political purposes while he was in opposition. Jasmine Brown has the story.
Those vendors say not only do they feel misled by the Prime Minister, they also feel used.
Are we a joke? Are we a joke? Because I'm beginning to feel like you're taking us for a darn joke, and we're not a joke. We are ordinary Bahamian people who's standing up for the rights of people.
Francis Johnson is one of several people charged following a 2016 Cabbage Beach protest led by beach vendors, taxi drivers, members of the Free National Movement and Democratic National Alliance, and several union leaders. On March 1, 2016, scores of angry protesters marched from the foot of the Paradise Island Bridge to the western access of Cable Beach, adjacent to Riu Hotel. The fence preventing beach access was torn down hours after the government advised in a statement that access to the beach via the pathway would be allowed for a period of time while the government and the property owner tried to reach an amicable resolution. 9 days later, 10 people were charged with various charges stemming from the protest. Minnis was among several dozen people who gathered outside the court that day. At the time, he said he expected the charges to be dropped.
What it would appear is the Attorney General obviously needs to step in and nullify this entire situation, because the Bahamian populace will no longer stand by and allow the government or allow the system to bring trumped-up charges on them.
Minnis went even further that day, pledging that if those charges were not dropped under an F&M government, the records will be wiped clean. A year and a half later, these former protesters say they are unhappy with the Prime Minister's silence on the issue.
I want Dr. Minnis to notice that, when you call for us, we're there. And you've not been there for us. We've been there for you before you were elected to be Prime Minister of this country. I stand firmly with the F&M. I am an F&M, but I felt as though it was all a political game.
Every time we appear to court, it don't be just once or twice, it's be twice we have to go back into court. And I think that's terrible for what the Minnis administration are doing. I'm a F&M, but I cannot be a F&M being treated like this. But all I would like for the Minnis administration to please straighten up this board. Right now the board is cricket. Please straighten up the board, Mr. Minnis.
but a prime minister can neither nolly a case nor expunge any criminal records, as noted by Attorney General Carl Bethel on Monday night. Despite that, the group is still asking the prime minister to step in.
You made a promise to these people. We understand the rules, we understand the laws. We know Dr. Minnis can't, do certain things, but he's in a position to do certain things, and we're asking for those certain things to happen.
We will continue to stand and we will continue to fight as a team, because we need to make sure that all Bahamians, and we need to make sure that every one of our prime ministers, especially this one who used us to get there, we expect him to stand with us. He said he made some promises, and Mr. Prime Minister, we are asking you to live up to your promises. Be a man to your word.
The fight in which our brother and sisters, along with myself, fight pertaining to the access of the beach and the rights to be on the beach is one that should be respected, and it is not all about us. It's about the Bahamian people.
The Attorney General has said that while he has not heard from the vendors' lawyers, at the end of the day, it's up to the prosecution. He explained, "If they do not advise me, then I see no need to intervene with the discretion of the prosecutors who have sight of the file and knowledge of the facts, none of which I have." Reporting for our News, I'm Jasmine Brown.
Well, Press Secretary Anthony Newbould says the Prime Minister will stand by his word regarding promises made to expunge the convictions of Cabbage Beach vendors who were arrested after destroying a fence while protesting last year. When pressed on the matter, Newbould was tight-lipped, saying Minnis would also be guided by the Attorney General.
First, it's a legal issue, and so the Prime Minister will, when it comes to legal matters, he will always be guided by his Attorney General. But the Prime Minister is a man who lives up to his commitment. And if I say anything to the public, if I say anything to the protesters at Cabbage Beach, the Prime Minister lives up to his commitments.
In other news, it'll be another 6 months before a CARICOM Commission report on marijuana is completed. That's according to Bahamas Ambassador to CARICOM, Ruben Ramming, who said all CARICOM heads of government will learn the contents of the Commission's report on their respective countries this summer.
The Commission is mandated to report for heads. So we're looking at about July, so that's almost in the next 6 months that they will pull that together. From there, I think it's reasonable to say that if there may be a need for further anything, or heads will make that determination. But they have a finite amount of time to finish the report.
And while the nation awaits the findings of the Commission's report, Ramming says Bahamians need to continue the dialogue. Both sides of the argument showed up at Friday night's town meeting attended by mostly men. Government has not taken a position on the issue, but Ramming said if one has to know, government takes the side of the law.
The position of any government is what's the law. It's as simple as that. And the position never change until the law change. We could say where we're leaning, but until the law changed, the law is always the position of the government in that regard.
When we spoke with the Bahamas Ambassador to CARICOM, he wouldn't give his personal position either. He said there are more important matters for government to deal with.
The position on marijuana was something I'd gladly have at other times when we're discussing it. But right now, we're going into a session right now to go over the legislative agenda going forward. And there's some real heavy lifting we need to do.
Some, like Christian Council President Bishop Delton Fernando, have questioned the urgency to hold a town meeting on an issue like marijuana when there should be town meetings on items like citizenship. Ramming said people shouldn't get too worked up as yet because the marijuana issue isn't anywhere high up on government's list of priorities. But he said he likes the discussion that's ongoing.
I smile because I understand activism. And my advice to my Bahamian people is, always know your strength. Your strength is in unity. Always understand that public opinion changes public policy. Not rudeness, not arrogance, not brashness. Find your common unity. Come together. Speak clearly. Speak strongly. But use your voice. And in time, you could bring about the change that you seek by addressing all the right questions and consistently hammering at your objective.
Still to come on our news, what's on the government's jobs agenda for this year? Plus, the Labor Minister weighs in on a recent sick out by water and sewage employees. That's coming up when our news returns.